Master data management allows organizations to virtually reconcile a whole variety of data sources. This is excellent for managing everything from retail SKUs to financial hierarchies and is increasingly valuable in the world of marketing technology, which features thousands of apps.
The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. Yet. Today's world teems with innovation. The nexus of hardware, software, and human ingenuity promises a revolution in possibilities. What does tomorrow look like? Witness Future Proof.
Yes, indeed, your host here, Eric Kavanagh, in year 14. Folks, that's right. And way back in like 2008, 2009, we had two of the guests of the show on today. So we've got some old salty veterans out there. And the topic is near and dear to my heart. It's a really cool one, folks. It's MDM, Master Data Management. So Masters of the Universe, how MDM leaders solve. That's what we're going to talk about today. And for the lay business person out there, MDM usually occurs under the covers. So you may not interact with it. You may not know too much about it, but you can thank it. I can tell you that. You can thank it for allowing you to get that strategic view of your business. Really, the best way I describe MDM is it's a technology space and a discipline that allows you to virtually reconcile information systems. So if you look at the history of data and data management, years ago, we came up with this concept of data warehousing. That was back in arguably the 1980s, really took off in the 90s and the aughts. Now it's hot again with companies like Snowflake and these crazy IPOs. So data warehousing is alive and well, folks. I can promise you that. But one thing we learned along the way is you can't get everything into the warehouse. It's just not going to happen. You can't get it, especially these days with so much big data, so many new information systems. We talk all the time about marketing, 7,000 applications, folks, 7,000. It's called the MarTech 7,000 because there are 7,000 different software as a service solutions you can use to optimize and streamline and automate sales and marketing. That's just sales and marketing. What about HR and finance and manufacturing? You know, frankly, MDM began in the product space. PIM, they called it product information management, and it allowed very large organizations, retailers, manufacturers, et cetera, to get a handle on these products. And the amount of innovation that we've seen over the last 10, 20 years is really mind-blowing. And we're going to learn about that today from our guests. We'll hear from Aaron Zornes, the godfather of data. He'll make you an offer you can't refuse. We're going to hear from Scott Taylor, the data whisperer out there, also brilliant man, truth seeker. He even has a hat that says truth, for crying out loud. And last but not least, the evangelist extraordinaire for information strategy, Bob Eve, long time friend of mine in the business. Actually, he's the guy who explained to me what data virtualization was way back in 2006. So time flies when you're having fun, folks. And without further ado, let's bring in the smart people. Aaron Zornes, the man who knows MDM from A to Z. His initials are AZ. Come on, man. Can't make this stuff up. Tell us a bit about the latest, the chairman emeritus of the MDM and Data Governance Summit. I attended many times, really enjoyed every experience. What's going on in the world of MDM today, Aaron? How big a deal is it? Where is it going?
Well, as you might imagine, our conferences are in hiatus mode. We're looking to perhaps do a mass reunion this November in New York. That's one of the loose plans floating around. But in my role as the MDM Institute, as a chief research officer, I primarily work with large organizations, global companies, governmental organizations, and so on. So what I'd like to share with our audience today, including Scott and Bob, who we've talked about recently, because we guys do get together and kick it around, although we don't get together physically that much these days. But if there's some leading use cases driving the ongoing adoption of master data management, we think of single customer view, know your supplier, know your customer, all that good stuff. One of the drivers at the moment is still finance reference data. And so I get a lot of calls about reference data in general, but it's moved more from just governing it through Calibra, that sort of thing, to more mastering reference data rather than just governing it. So that's been one nuance of the use cases market drivers. Secondarily, with all the chaos inherent in the pandemic, know your supplier, KYS, has popped to the top for a lot of people. Again, just trying to source, trying to keep our automobile manufacturing lines in process, keep our pharma supplies, and not to mention agribusiness, et cetera, across borders. I'm in Europe at the moment, and Brexit is just a total disaster here. Okay, nothing can move between the UK and the continent. Nothing. Okay, it's mind-blowing. But even hospitality, surprisingly, you would think the hospitality took a huge hit, like the airlines and the hotels in particular. But the hotels are really focused on the customer experience management. And so they're investing in there to make sure they get it right. So when there is this rebound, as we all believe it's coming, the bounce back, that they'll be ready. Airlines, it's still about cutting costs for the most part and preparing for the big haircuts they're going to get one of these days, depending upon whether or not they get X amount of government relief. So that's just an update on the use cases, the market drivers. The other second item of three things I'd like to bring up would be that there is now actual cloud native MDM. Wow. Instead of just what we call lift and shift. Lift and shift is where you would take an MDM product, just like you could take a CRM or anything, and throw it on a private or public cloud and run it. Well, now we have vendors that have actually decomposed, like a deconstructed taco. They take everything apart, like Oracle Fusion, like SAP NetWeaver, and like Salesforce, etc. But the idea is to take your MDM apps and totally break them up into real microservices, not just gross macro level APIs, but real microservices that are self-living, if you like, and native. Okay, so that's been a big deal, and some of the vendors are starting to do that. Okay.
Yep.
Now, the third thing I'd like to talk about, and I find this really interesting, and I'd like to hear from the rest of the people here today, is consumption pricing. Historically, you would pay $2 to $3 million for an enterprise license for MDM. And whether it was customer or product master, and you might step through several stages depending upon the number of unique customers or unique products or suppliers that you were mastering in terms of paying more. But consumption pricing is something new, and it's different than subscription pricing. Subscription pricing, is named user, and we've watched a lot of the application package vendors do that. Even though they may not have a cloud native solution, they've gone to subscription pricing. Okay. So that's normal for the market at this point and overall the software industry. But consumption pricing says pay for X amount of consumption units and then use them for what you like. And then we come back in 6 months, 9 months, a year, and we measure what you actually use and true out like your electricity. If you have solar and you're selling back into the grid, you true out at some point and you pay up or you pay down. So consumption pricing, imagine if instead of paying $2 or $3 million just for your MDM and another $1 million for data quality, another $1 million for data integration to nicely wrap everything up and integrate everything. Instead that you paid $1 million a year, and that you then went into the model where you use X amount of this for your governance as you prep. Then after that, you use X amount for data quality as you clean your data. Then you use in the next 3 to 6 months, X amount as you load your MDM hubs. And then you use X amount to run the operational or analytical MDM transactions through, okay? And so imagine that consumption pricing, and there are vendors starting to do that. It's not all you can eat, it's not subscription pricing, it's consumption pricing. So I'll toss it back to you all. That's my quick observation of the big picture.
No, that was great stuff. The cloud native side of it, I wondered years ago when the cloud really matures, if cloud is going to be able to kind of solve MDM out of the box almost. And it sounds like we're kind of getting close with that kind of microservices architecture. But I do wonder real quick before we bring in Scott, I'll throw this back over to you, Aaron, GDPR, CCPA, all these different regulations around data sharing. Was that a wrench in the works to the MDM vision, or is that just fuel for the fire?
I'd say it's fuel for the fire. It didn't necessarily goose the market in a tremendous way, although a lot of consultancies made money, consulting on GDPR and CCPA and the equivalent in Brazil and Indonesia. Other countries also that have several 100 million people also have their own statutes when it comes to privacy increasingly. So we see it as a part of know your customer. Likewise, know where your customer data is, that is governance, so that you can report back to the consumer and so that you can opt out. And now that I've been living in Europe on and off for X number of months, I've really enjoyed the fact that I can opt out of all sorts of Google this and that, okay? And they slapped Google right and left here.
I love it. I do love that. And not because I don't like Google, but I do like pushing back on some of these data privacy aberrations, I'm going to call them. And Scott, I'll bring you into this conversation too. There's a theme I want to promote all year now as these forces are starting to coalesce and crystallize. And of course, we're talking about GDPR and Google and the right to be forgotten, which for our audience out there means, according to GDPR, this regulation out of the EU, you as a citizen of the EU have the right to tell XYZ Corporation that you don't want them holding data about you. Personal data, for example. The transactional stuff has to stick around for various reasons, but personal information. And I think we need to push something broader, which is the right to be respected. And that basically says to these companies, these technology companies, I want, or just any company, I want you to be responsible with my data, and I want you to think it through. I want you to have policies that make sense, that are understandable and adhered to, and all of that. If that comes together, man, we solved all kinds of problems. You greatly increase customer experience. You don't have to worry so much about these data breaches or these problems anymore. It's a win-win-win. What do you think, Scott?
Absolutely. None of that happens without MDM. So all these things that you're talking about, authenticated identity, being able to maintain privacy, controlling data, it always comes back to it for me, that it all starts and it must be built on a solid foundation of master data, reference data, metadata, all those foundational piece parts. You just can't do it. And that's the message I think we have an opportunity to continue to reinforce. Every one of these new trends coming up, if privacy's big, if transforming your customer experience, all these things, that IoT, everything that they're talking about today, none of that happens without proper data management. And when you were talking about data warehousing way back when, that didn't really work unless you had the data managed well and structured well. So the observation I've come to is MDM is macro trend agnostic. No matter where we were, no matter where we are now, no matter where we're going, you're still going to need this foundational data.
Got to write that down.
You can write it down. It's hyphenated, macro trend.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I know how to use hyphens. I'm one of the few people.
Good. Just checking.
I get all annoyed when people use hyphens when they shouldn't and don't when they should. That's a problem. But
also, thanks for having me, by the way. Hi, everybody.
Thanks
for having me. Good to see you, Eric. And great to be with you, Aaron. Yeah.
MDM is macro trend agnostic. That is freaking brilliant, I have to say. Hats off on that. And, I think as Aaron is talking about cloud native, what I think is so cool is that going back in time again, real quick, service-oriented architecture, right? That's what we talked about years ago, coarse-grained services, fine-grained services. I think that the sort of DNA of SOA just got baked into how cloud was built. And now, as you look at microservice architectures, it's not exactly the same thing. It is different in its ways, but it's sort of a hybrid of virtualization and SOA. The beautiful thing is a lot of these principles and tenets can really be woven into the fabric. And in the old days of MDM, you had to rule with an iron fist if you wanted it to work well. And that doesn't work with people. That doesn't work with disparate groups of people, different departments. They don't like to do things your way. But if it's in the cloud, you kind of have to do it that way. And if it's in the cloud that's ever evolving, well, guess what? You can bake the principles in, you can bake in the rules, and then build around that. What do you think about that, Scott?
That feels right. I mean, I think everybody wants to see things one way, their way. And that's always been the challenge with, hierarchies, taxonomies, identification, but you got to be able to spread that truth, hence my hat, determine the truth. That's what my hat's all about, the truth hat. You're talking about service-oriented architecture. Aaron was talking about, software as a service. I've seen this interesting thing happening. It's a platform as a service with governance as a service, and they're calling it pass gas.
Oh, come on.
Just leave that one for you.
Yeah, I got it. Let's move quickly through that one. Let's clear the air a bit, folks.
That's an elevator. That's an elevator pitch you don't want to hear.
Right, there you go. He's here all week, folks. He's in Palm Beach right now. So if you're in Florida, go by and see him.
Come find me, yes.
No, but the use cases are everywhere. Like you said, know your customer, huge. Know your supplier, really big deal these days, folks. I don't know any cyclists out there, but you can't get bike parts anymore because of all this disruption. That was the case 2 years ago in 2019 because of tariffs. It was the case last year because of COVID. It's the case still this year because we still haven't sorted it out. But guys, there's a lot of opportunity here. And if you know your supplier, if you know your customer, these are tremendous values you get from doing MDM right. Correct, Scott?
Absolutely. There's none of those things work, right? So whatever that big idea is that your CEO's talking about, your board's talking about, transforming our customer experience, we want to move to an as-a-service offering, seriously, right? We want to, instead of selling widgets, we want to license the value of our widget as a service.
Interesting.
IoT, all these major board level initiatives, the success of all of them are inextricably linked to the successful output of your data management program. There's just no two ways about it. It's the only thing that will allow that stuff to work. It's got to be part of it.
Yeah. And it's the foundation, again, of moving into the cloud too. So if you think about the journey from on-prem to cloud, which is happening, it's real, we're feeling it, it's going to be there forever. I do think the demise of data centers on-prem are exaggerated. The rumors of their demise are exaggerated. I think on-prem data centers are going to be here for a long time, but it's going to change what we manage in those environments. But nonetheless, MDM can give you that conduit to leveraging multi-cloud and hybrid cloud real quick, right, Scott?
You're going to need the right data. When I hear people talk about, again, I'm the least technical guy on this call here, okay? I'm all about the why, not the how, the strategic importance. But when I hear these new things, right, it's cloud, it's hybrid, it's an analytics graph hub, fabric mesh, whatever the latest thing is, you're still going to need good data. So none of that replaced the need for having highly structured, well-governed, expertly stewarded content that fuels all those applications.
Ooh. Next up is Bob Eve, the Zen Master of Data Strategy, now over at TIBCO. Big thanks to TIBCO for their support, allowing us to bring this content free of charge. But Bob Eve, you're the guy who taught me about data virtualization, and these days you're out there talking to clients. And I always love to hear what they're doing with this stuff, because one of the funnest parts, I think, of doing enterprise software is that you have an idea of what you want the software to be used for, but your clients have other ideas too. And they come up with some really cool plans of what they do. So tell us a bit about your experience there, Bob.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, MDM, because, to quote Stuart Bond over at IDC, who runs the data intelligence and integrity practice, he said, master data touches everything. Every transaction in your business, every activity in your business includes master data. And, think of procure to pay. Procure, all right, so the vendor you're procuring from, the product you're procuring, product master, and to pay all the way out to the customer and the customer master. And that's probably the most important, business process in the organization. So, it's nice to see just like what's really important to organizations, and then apply that to helping them deliver on that, to help them achieve those objectives.
Yeah, that's just fascinating stuff. It really is. And I think he's right, because it does touch everything. And we kind of talked about that at the onset of the show here. Product information and management, PIM, is where a lot of this all started, because you have all these different product lines and hierarchy management. That was my first foray into MDM, working with the guys from Raza Dimension Server. And I remember one call in particular, I can see myself at the cafe in Austin asking question after question after question. Okay, what's the difference between reference data and master data? And what exactly is a reference architecture? And it takes some time, and to really wrap your head around MDM and hierarchy management in particular, it takes some time. Those guys are big in analytical MDM, which is like, I want to see the world through this view. I want to see the world through that view. I want to understand how to reorganize my team to work in a post-COVID world, reorganize the financials so they roll up properly. I mean, all of this stuff can happen and is greatly expedited and optimized thanks to well-done MDM, right, Bob?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, organizations are going to spend about $7 billion on MDM next year, or this year, and probably $9 billion by 2025. To invest that kind of money, the business case must be quite compelling, right? So when I talk to these organizations, I see them trying to realize value in like 7 different ways. They all start with R. I don't know if I'll make it through all of them, but the first and foremost is revenue. And we've talked a little bit about that already. You need to provide those personalized cross-sell and upsell offers. You want to really engage with the customer, strengthen their loyalty, very personalized interaction, consistent experiences, tailor products and services to their specific needs. Well, that's all around customer data. Now, you talked about SaaS before. I mean, some of the interaction with your customers happening in Salesforce from your sellers. Some of it's happening in Marketo from your marketing program. Some of it's ServiceNow because you're servicing the products. Those are just, your financial system, or you're collecting for the products you've sold. So how do you really improve your ability to drive revenue? We have to have the data to do that. And then from there, you can work forward to create those experiences, drive those new offers, etc.
Oh, go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say, to me, and we talked about this before the show, information strategy. I mean, I almost think there should be a department at every organization, not just the analysts, not just the data engineers, for example. Those are different jobs, but information strategy. What is our strategy going to be to leverage our information and third-party information too? Alternative data is a huge, huge trend these days. It's never going away. It's going to become bigger and bigger. And it kind of lets you map the real world scenario to your own data and thus learn, where are we missing things? Where are we doing well? In those comparisons, you can kind of understand things. And to me, MDM has always been such a powerful centerpiece for an information strategy, right?
Yeah. But I think, what's your information strategy? That's defined by your business strategy, right? Is your strategy to do that customer engagement, like we just talked about, and really delight your customers and really create those long bonded relationships? Or are you kind of a new products innovation company? So the second R would be reinvention. How are you innovating your products and launching them? That's all about your R&D teams. And, you need the master data around projects and products and vendors and employee data, because like your research scientists bringing a new drug to market. So there's all this data across every stage of your product development lifecycle, and all of that's glued together by master data. And if you can't glue that together and get control of that and speed that innovation, that data strategy has to be supportive of that business strategy. We're going to innovate. We're going to lead the market with new products, cool new products.
The thing is that these systems are never going to run themselves, right? You're always going to need people involved with these things. And so people have to train themselves to understand higher and higher order views of the world and be able to drill down. And that's the key, right? Is you want to be able to pull back and see what's happening and then drill down to the specifics to see where there are overlaps, to see where there's redundancy and things of this nature. And I'll throw it over to you, Aaron. In terms of use cases, it seems to me that MDM is going to help us much better understand an increasingly complex and intertwined world. What do you think about that?
Yeah, when you combine master data management with data governance, okay, whether it's catalogs or business repositories or whatever, in particular, when you crowdsource through the business community how they use the information and what information they use, and you map that to the metadata that the IT side of the world maintains and grows and cleans up, et cetera. That's how we ultimately get an understanding of our world, okay, bringing the two together. And that's been quite a challenge for all of us, because software companies are very good at selling to end users with glitz, and sex and sizzle and all this good stuff. And then the IT people are left holding the bag, trying to make it all work, or trying to make it integrate, or trying to support it, et cetera. And so you can see IT's hesitation to wanting to bring to forestalling new software coming in. And they have their preferred strategic centers of gravity in terms of vendors, and they try to manage to that. On the other hand, if something truly is providing a competitive differentiation, or something that we have to do for compliance, as we statutory reporting, chart of accounts, know your customer, know your supplier, that sort of thing, then we may step out of our comfort zone when it comes to mega vendors, and go to some of the newer $500 million software companies like Anaplan or OneStream. These are companies that are basically replacing Oracle DRM, the financial management system that we all grew up with from the old Hyperion HYP days. But in particular, that brings up another interesting point, in that a lot of the software vendors have tried to do the cloud shift and lift. And when they do that, sure, they may have brute force functionality there, but it doesn't natively integrate with all the other fabric of the cloud, the workflow, the data flows, and so on and so on. But another consideration is that when you go with a shift and lift, or when you look at what vendors are proposing, our vendors would all like us to think that, yeah, they understand the cloud. Yeah, they're going microservices. Yeah, they're going subscription pricing, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, typically when they rehost their software, whether private or public cloud, we're only seeing 10 to 15% of the functionality.
Wow.
Okay? They're not giving us what we used to get on-prem.
That's a really good point.
And that's a huge gotcha. Okay, that's a huge gotcha, because that's what's biting Oracle right now, is their DRM cloud is a subset of the Hyperion financial management system.
We're talking all about MDM, Masters of the Universe. How do they solve? And our good buddy Bob Eve from TIBCO knows a lot about that. And Bob, I love that you're talking to customers so much these days. How do you solve these problems, whether it's an early stage, a middle stage? What does that look like as you're trying to shepherd your clients to get the most use out of their technology and their data? Quite frankly, what does that look like?
Sure, and this might sound trite, start with the business, but actually, it's so true. We talked about it already. Your digital transformation strategy, your business strategy, is that about customer engagement, innovation, operational excellence? Are you at risk for compliance purposes, et cetera? That's really got to drive it. But there's the other side of the business too. They have to participate. You need the MDM tools to be business friendly enough to where they can actually engage. They understand the data quality. I give you an example, Panera Bread, they've got master data around menus, around recipes, around ingredients. Who maintains that data at Panera Bread? The answer is the corporate chefs. Wow. I mean, the corporate chef is about as far away as you can get from like an IT expert, correct? Right. But do they understand these? Do they understand the challenges in that data? They understand when something's incorrect. They understand when they've launched a new sandwich or a new soup. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they really maintain that. So I think that the first and most important thing is that tight business engagement, tight involvement, and with that, you can start to work your way through a lot of the other challenges.
That's right. And the data whisperer wants to get involved. Scott.
I want to bring up an idea. Context. You talk about how important context is to data, to any. MDM brings that context. That's where you manage.
It's a forcing function.
It's about but the data itself is what everything else your company does is about. Mm-hmm. That's where it's kept. Your customers, your vendors, your partners, your prospects, your vendors, your ingredients, your materials, your assets, those nouns of the business are literally about what your business does, who it does it with, what it makes. These are the core, the reason your business exists. So when people look for context or data mining or looking in big data to find whatever they're looking for, the things they're looking for are about what your master data is. Mm-hmm. You've got to start there. You've got to start there.
Yeah, there's a sort of blessing and curse, but I'll throw this over to Aaron to comment on. The blessing is that MDM touches everything, and the curse is that MDM touches everything. But I think from a business driver perspective, it's more of a blessing than a curse, because anyone anywhere in the business is affected by bad MDM or non-existent MDM. So anyone out there, if they're listening, driving down the street or at home listening on the radio, and you're trying to solve some business problem, let's say it's how do we reinvent now that the COVID has come and changed how we do business? How are we going to reinvent ourselves? I think a big driver, a big catalyst for that conversation is to better understand MDM in the context of your business. What do you think, Aaron?
I would agree. Clearly, MDM is still a multi-billion-dollar software business, although it's becoming diffused that MDM is blended into everything that you're buying.
Right.
Okay, but that again causes a problem, because now we get, once again, silos of MDM. Now, I talk to large companies, and they'll have one product for product master, another one for customer, another one for pricing, another one for reference data. And that's where data fabric like TIBCO, allows you to unify this. Okay, and that's the concept again. It doesn't have to be terribly machine learning oriented or anything like that. There's just some basic blocking and tackling that says metadata across these systems, a unified business view of what the business user needs. Simple things like that can be orchestrated with the workflows and data flows. Remember, TIBCO was originally the information bus company. So, TIBCO had that business process management flavor or leaning, where a lot of MDM vendors did not have that. Okay, it was afterthought or shoehorned into their overall enterprise application integration situation. So the good news with Fabric, Data Fabric in particular, is it's got to be data and workflow.